Hi and welcome back. So in the previous video, we looked at the cycle of avoidance and self-sabotage. So in this video, I'm going to look at some ways that we can perhaps overcome this and break this cycle. And there are a number of approaches I use in my coaching practice that you can adopt to break cycles of avoidant behavior and learn new ways of managing anxiety, even confronting your fears with confidence. One of the first ones, and one of the very key ones, actually takes us back to the video on self-awareness, and it's about identifying your triggers. It's really important to identify the triggers of your anxiety, to focus on the physical sensations and emotions such as breathlessness, heart palpitations, perspiration, dry mouth, tension in the back, neck and shoulders, which is where we keep a lot of our tension, stress and anxiety. We might feel anger or notice anger or fearfulness. It's useful to observe negative thought processes and how you anticipate certain scenarios. Then you can develop a deeper awareness of how these patterns reinforce defensive behaviors, such as using escape mode at social events, feeling victimized, procrastinating over deadlines, or saying no to people who make unreasonable demands on your time. So the first step is in noticing the triggers that set off your anxious feelings and your stress responses. And once you've got more of an awareness of the triggers, you can then move on to doing something about them. Another thing I use is what's called reward-based learning. So in order to break deeply entrenched habits of avoidance, which you might find familiar or comforting, you need to perhaps develop new habits which provide you with emotionally rewarding outcomes to offset the old ones that you're moving on from. This generates new neural pathways which stimulate the sensory reward pathways to your amygdala, your emotional brain, which teaches you to learn reward-based behaviors that stimulate the release of dopamine and reinforce positive sensory experiences. So by doing this, you're starting to reward yourself, but in a positive way. Prior to that, you were rewarding yourself by negative experiences, which kept the cycle of anxiety going. But by this time, you're replacing them with positive outcomes that will actually be more beneficial to you. And then we look at things like growth mindset, which is quite a big thing at the moment. Um, it's growth mindset's really the only way an anxious mind is able to overcome symptoms of stress and anxiety. And it's by learning to adapt, developing a growth mindset which seeks to experiment, adjust, and learn by trial and error. That is by becoming self-aware, open-minded and curious about new situations, and accepting the challenges and learning to enjoy problem solving, not just living in the cycle of anxiety and stress, but actually developing a growth mindset which allows you to break free from this and think about new positive situations and breaking that cycle. Another one, which I do use with some of my coaching clients, and I know is well used in other situations and with colleagues of mine, is exposure therapy. This is basically repeatedly exposing yourself to low levels of stress in the feared situation. It might sound not very nice to kind of expose yourself to the fearful situations, but by doing so, you slowly teach your amygdala or the emotional brain to tolerate anxious feelings and make positive associations with a feared object, such as overcoming a fear of crowds. You might do this by driving to a location that you're anxious about, walking up to the entrance, entering with a friend, walking around alone, immersing yourself into a crowd, reaching out to make eye contact and talking to someone in the crowd. Now, obviously, you wouldn't be expected to do this on one visit. It's about doing it slowly. It's building up a tolerance very slowly. So you might drive to the place that you're anxious about. You might sit with there for a while, do some breathing exercises, let your anxiety sort of and stress sort of diminish. Go home, come back, and do something similar the next day or the next week, and then gradually over time you increase your tolerance to this particular situation, this particular environment, and over time you get used to it and you understand that actually The anxiety that you feared, that you anticipated, isn't as bad as you think. So it's building up a real tolerance to it, and this can really work. It may take a little bit of time to do it, but it has real success. And then one of the other things I look at is cognitive restructuring. It involves challenging your belief system by systematically interrupting negative trains of thought and replacing them with a reality-based observation and thought processes. Similar in a way to kind of the CBT coaching that I use in my practice. But by conditioning yourself to disrupt automatic superstitious thinking, you learn to dismiss the disproportionate fears you've built up in your mind through screenplaying worst case scenarios or negative dialogue. And then we come on to mindfulness, which is a massive thing at the moment. There's so much about it in the news, and it's something that a lot of people are talking about because it really does. It helps switch off for a while, helps switch off your anxious thoughts and your stress. It enables you to practice being more present in this moment, focusing your self-awareness on sensations and emotions, rather than getting caught up in excessive worrying with preoccupations with the past or anticipating worst case scenarios, which happens a lot in anxious people. I know it did with me. You can learn to step back, use diaphragmatic breathing, or another word for it is belly breathing. Meditation, self-compassion exercises to stimulate your vagus nerve. If you don't know much about the vagus nerve, then look it up on the internet. It's a really useful thing. It deactivates the buildup of stress hormones. But it's also important to learn how to self-regulate emotions in a state of hyperarousal using various grounding techniques. So if you freeze or dissociate, even using stretching, pushing and pulling techniques to prevent automatic freezes in the body. Particular breathing techniques, like we've talked about the diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing, it's something that I'll demonstrate to you later on in the course. But it's a fantastic way of just de-stressing yourself in the here and now. And if you ever find yourself in a really stressful or anxious situation, you can do belly breathing just to reduce your stress levels, reduce your sort of blood pressure and your heartbeat very, very quickly. People don't even know that you're doing it because it's quite a sort of an internal process. But it's a fantastic way just to calm yourself in that here and now. So the final one really is about self-empowerment. And it's a way of learning new activities and physical exercises which help you to feel self-empowered, more confident, and to build up your self-esteem after a traumatic experience. So now we've looked at some of the strategies. What I'd like to do in the next section is to move on to some very basic, not so well, some basic and some a little bit more complicated, but very, very effective strategies for reducing your stress and managing your anxieties. So thanks for being here and thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next section. Take care.